Alright, so in this video we'll attempt with Blender 4.3.0, which came out on the 19th of November in 2024. To make it easier, I'm going to hold down the Windows button and press R and go into the %appdata% location of my computer. And from here, we are just going to rename the Blender folder inside of Blender Foundation. I'm just going to put an A at the end, so that way I can retain my original configuration. And from here, when I load up Blender 4.3, it will load up as if it's never seen me before. So we'll give that a moment to pop up. Now that we have things up, let us rescale the window. So here we're looking at the splash screen. If we're looking at the splash screen, that means that Blender's been reset from its last load. So from here, we're going to set our spacebar action to search. We'll choose continue. And keep in mind, we are using 4.3.0, which is slightly older than the version that I normally go to, which is 4.3.2. So for this, what I'm going to do is just drag and drop these zips onto the window. We'll drag and drop Box Cutter. We will click OK. Now, even though Box Cutter is just updated, I am installing its previous version, even though it doesn't make much of a difference. Whenever it comes to hardops, I am installing 0.9.88_7_1. And then finally, we have Insolve. Notice the icons appearing over on the side. So whenever we bring Insolve, we see that Insolve has also been added, meaning that we now can press Alt-W to jump into Box Cutter, and we can begin working. So sometimes customers will forget to do the first steps of clearing out the folder or renaming it in order to attempt things clean, in order to, have a quicker time with things. However, whenever it comes to installation issues, all the steps recommended are all the steps requested to be followed. So we'll press T in order to twist, and now we have twisted this object. So now we are done. Let's press Alt X. We'll press A in order to add a new mirror. We'll just mirror it below itself. I'm just going to control click array in order to add another array modifier on top of all of this, where we can just scroll this up into becoming a line. Under add modifier, we're just going to add curve, go in edit mode, and now I'm able to deform this shape no matter what. And this was just a basic cube that we took and deformed into this, but just like that, we were able to get started with hardops and Box Cutter without any issue. So with that, I'm going to just close Blender, and let's take a look at what we have here. So I'm under Blender 4.3.0, specifically the version mentioned. And let's load it up again. And everything should be installed. However, we forgot to save our default layout. So even though we have Box Cutter, hardops, Insolve, let's jump over into Insolve. Let's select the camera and the light, and let's delete them. We'll zoom in on the cube, and from here, with Box Cutter open and this set as my startup scene, I'm going to just take a moment and save this as my startup scene. And now what this means is that whenever I close Blender and I go in and open it back up again, it will now open up in the shape and scale that I need it to be. So now I'm truly able to get started with Box Cutter. Just get in here and get box cutting without any sort of delay. Instead of having to go in and load up Box Cutter and all of that, we see that now I'm able to just quickly get in here, dice and twist, a little bit of Box Cutter. So with that, we have now configured Blender for 4.3.0 using the last version of Box Cutter that came out. So, which probably is a version that is had on your computer. So next, let's move up to Blender 4.3.2. Whenever installation issues happen, it is important to clear out or refresh Blender in order to make sure that there isn't any outside interference with us. Otherwise, we are having to go through an inordinate amount of interference. So here I'm in Blender 4.3.2. If we pop up its splash screen, you see it says 4.3.2. I keep trying to click and move it because, when you... Okay, so it appears you can move the splash screen now. Okay, whenever you see your icon change, it usually tells you, yeah, you can move the splash screen. So we're moving around the splash screen, but you can see that I'm using 4.3.2. So now I go in and I'm able to work without issue. And that is all there is to it. So let's say that there was an issue with the installation. Well, I would say you would need to go in, hold down the Windows button, press R, go under the %appdata% location, and from here you would go to Blender Foundation and your Blender folder, and we're working in 4.3. So let's say that we wanted to nuke just our configuration. Well, all we have to do is delete the configuration folder, and the next time Blender loads up, it will load up as if it's never seen us before. keep in mind that the extensions we installed are still installed. So that means that we don't have to go through an installation process, but we did nuke the configuration of Blender. So now we're looking at Blender. We can go ahead and set this to search. We can choose continue, and let's just press Control I, delete the objects that isn't the cube. Let's press F4, load up our preferences, and let's just enable the tools. So under add-ons, we're going to search for 9. We're going to enable 9 for hard ops. We'll go to box. We'll enable box cutter for box cutter, and then we'll enable NSO for install. And now that we have these enabled, we are good to go. So now I'm going to go up to the top. Well, first, let's start up box cutter. Let's also make sure dots is present. So when I press Control, I have dots, and we will just go ahead and save our startup file. And now this means that I can, draw using dots as a jump off point, one of my favorite features. And we're just doing some shapes. And then we can mirror this to the other side, dice it, twist it, roll it down to low segments, but we see that that one didn't work out. So let's undo that and let's dice again. But this time, let us press Q to change the algorithm. Let's press T, and now we see that it goes through. So sometimes dice will have an issue, and it requires that projection is the algorithm used, but just like that, we were able to perform our maneuver. And this is in Blender 4.3.2. Previously, we're in Blender 4.3.0, just showing. And the thing is that the updates that we're doing are mainly on the utility side, so we're not necessarily doing anything that causes version incompatibility. So really, even the last 10-15 versions probably should work without issue, since we are mainly doing maintenance on the tool. So let's press Q. We will just add a curve, and just like that, we now have turned this into a robot spine. So just like that, that is how we get started with configuring and enabling HardOps Box Cutter if the configuration has been nuked. But if you're having issues, I would recommend either going back and renaming the Blender folder and loading it up cleanly, or go in one step further and inside of your specific version, delete the configuration folder or quarantine it. See, me personally, I like to right-click the quarantine folder and compress it into a zip file, and that will save me the config for later. So basically, I can delete the configuration, I can go and load up Blender just like it was previously, do my configuration thing that I would normally do, but at the end, if I want my original configuration back, I can just go to this folder and choose to basically extract here, and we will place the config folder back where it was, and then the next time I open up Blender, it will open up exactly where I left off. So whenever it comes to getting around Blender, it's important to be able to manage and deal with your configuration. This is something that people are a little averse to getting to in their computer, but it's the reason, but there's a reason why it's the first step that I go to, is because it resolves the majority of issues that come up. So with that, we are now able to get in here, use Box Cutter, and we're in Blender 4.3.2. In fact, let us close this, and we're just going to load up Blender 4.3.0 on the stable side. So we are using the last stable release, 4.3.0, and we see that its configuration uses the same configuration as 4.3.2. So we don't have to do any reconfiguring for it, but we are able to quickly get to work, just working, just doing the things that we would normally do. And with that, this installation is complete.